Let it be known that without self-nature, unborn and empty, are a personal soul. The Skandha-continuity, causation, the Dhatus, and existence and non-existence. So this is about the personal soul. One of the ways in which Buddhists would distinguish themselves from Hindus is Buddhists don't subscribe to the belief in a personal soul. The Hindus believe that there's this thing called the jiva, the individual soul, which is born again and again and again until liberation is reached. But the Buddhists don't subscribe to this personal soul, this jiva. On the other hand, the Buddhists also believe that you're born again and again and again until liberation is reached. So they believe in the same mechanism, but they just don't describe it in the same way. So it's a bit tricky for the Buddhists. Well, if you believe in past lives and future lives, what's the connection? What is it that gets reborn? What is it that is learning? What is it that is acquiring merits and demerits and is born in a future life in accordance with your balance sheet of merits and demerits until liberation is reached? I don't really want to bother about it, but it is part of the context here. The Buddhists came up with this understanding that what there are these skandhas, which are covered in video 13, verse 11. And so rather than believe in a personal soul, they started believing in these skandhas. And it's these that continue from one life to the next. It's more like a kind of recycling that's going on, just as our physical elements are recycled. They go back to the earth, and the earth becomes plants, becomes food, becomes flesh, and so on. Your non-physical components are also recycled, like emotions are recycled. They all have their energy which needs to be worked out in some form or another. So let's just look at this verse in some more detail. Without self-nature, unborn and empty, are a personal soul. So in other words, there's no substance to the notion of a personal soul. It isn't something that comes into being. It's unborn. But this is true of everything. The Buddhists don't believe in a first cause. Hindus don't believe that either. The universe is something which always is. The Indian mind has never had any inclination to explain how things came into being. Things always have been. The Western mind seems to have had this disposition to believe that there must be a first cause. Perhaps this comes from the book of Genesis. God brought everything into being, although we don't know where God came from. But it seems to be a belief which has infected science as well. Science seems to want to believe that there was a first cause somewhere along the way. But that's just a belief. There's no evidence to suggest that. Why should we believe in a first cause? Why do we have this inclination? Is that a logical thing to believe that there must have been a beginning? Not really. Anyway, the Indian mind seems to be free from this particular disposition. And it's that freedom from belief in a first cause which characterizes their understanding of the universe as empty. If there was no first cause, how can anything exist? What we are experiencing, or what we believe we're experiencing, can have no more substance than a mirage or a dream. So, it's without self-nature. It's unborn and empty. And so too are the explanations for it, the skandhas. Buddhists came to believe in the reality of these skandhas, the reality of perception, of form, of consciousness, of the discriminating consciousness, of psychological disposition, and of feelings. This is the Skandha-continuity. But this verse is telling us that this too has no self-nature. It's unborn and empty. So too is causation. The skandhas cause further skandhas. Feelings cause other feelings. Psychological tendencies cause other psychological tendencies, so on and so on. And the dhatus, these are the elements. Not in the normal sense, but they're the elements of cognition. We came across this already when looking at vijnana. You have 6 sense perceptions, the normal 5, and the mind which perceives thoughts. So you have these 6 sense organs, plus what kind of object they perceive. So the eyes experience visual objects, the ears experience auditory objects, and so on. And there's a consciousness associated with each of these. There's awareness that the eye is seeing something. There's awareness that the ear is hearing something. That awareness imbues the object with reality, a sense of reality. So these are the 18 dhatus, the 6 sense organs, 6 objects of perception, and the 6 consciousnesses associated with them. And existence and non-existence are also devoid of self-nature. They're unborn and they're empty. This is the ultimate discrimination we like to make. Does something exist or doesn't it exist? In the previous video, I spoke about what the Buddha did when he first achieved enlightenment. He started recollecting his past lives. But this verse here is telling us that this is empty. These past lives are empty. They're without substance. We can't really differentiate them between memory and imaginings. What's the difference between a memory and something we imagine? In certain circles we have something called false memories. We believe it's a memory, it feels like a memory, but evidence indicates that it was not something that actually happened. We've got this discriminating mind which tells us that something was a memory, that it actually happened, and something was imaginary. But this verse is telling us we're not interested in this discrimination, the discrimination between existence and non-existence. We're not interested in the notion of a personal soul, nor are we interested in alternative explanations for this thing called a personal soul, which is the explanation of the skandhas. So this verse is having a go at traditional Buddhist understanding. It's agreeing that the notion of a personal soul has no real substance, but it's also saying that the analysis of this particular understanding has no substance either. I didn't read out the bracketed part of this particular verse. I said existence and non-existence, but what Professor Suzuki's put in, he said, and the notion of existence and non-existence. And this is actually correct, because it's all notional. All understanding of the external world is notional. And we must move away from any belief that what we understand about the world can be nothing more than notional. So in developing our relationship with the world, we have to come to realize that all our understanding about the world, all our beliefs about the world, are no more than notional. Everything that can be said about the world is nothing more than notions. And this is what the Buddha said in verse 21. To me, teaching is an expedient, but I do not teach external signs. The ignorant, because of their attachment to existence, seize on signified and signifying. So he's not teaching external signs, he's not talking about things out there, he's not saying how these things are. But the ignorant, because of their attachment to existence, seize on signified and signifying. Signifying is the word used, and signified is the object that the object that is labelled by the word. So the Buddhists came to believe in these skandhas, but this was just an expedient. They're not something real. I'll say a bit more about verse 21 in the next video.